by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we sell.
Wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. Today is Thursday, the 8th of August. Daily levels. Let's go. So, Bitcoin had inflows yesterday, slight inflows. ETH had inflows as well. Good to see. Paths. Here's a couple of paths to see. What matters next after Bitcoin had sort of a mini bear trap. It dropped down to a swing low from previous. It did break this swing low here, right, which is a valid level, but it dropped back down into a previous structure level and actually held, reaccumulated, bands went red, bear trap, push back up. A key feature of this, if you listen to my daily lesson from last night about flip-flopping, a key feature of this is flip-flopping. It's going to look bad, it's going to look good, it's going to look bad, it's going to look good. When overall, the most likely thing to happen still after such a move is that you have many days of chop, probably another few. Bitcoin is setting up where downside seems to be getting bought into so far. We could see price squeezing higher. The path for that would be something like this. Whether it goes in the green path, it's not really relevant. But what matters next is when it takes these highs, and I think it will, what's the reaction? It's not bearish for price to fail a breakout, right? Whenever price is rising up off a low, and you see it like this, it can grab and be part of a bullish rising trend, or rising, I suppose. It wouldn't really be a trend, but it's more of a upward sloping accumulation, you could call it, versus the reaction off of hitting the highs. If there's a stronger sell-off and then consolidation, you're looking at something more like this, where it gets more volatile and choppy and probably leads to a more distributive type of price action. So what matters most is the reaction. If it takes the highs, it almost certainly will reject back inside because people will get long, it will flush them back in. But if it holds then and it starts to chop around near the highs with lower volatility, that's probably when it's setting up for more of a move. And at that point, same thing applies. Once it breaks above 58, you're looking at 60 as your next target, next resistance. But I'd still say the most likely path and the most likely outcome from here is some form of sideways, where it's in a range like this for a while. That's probably what we're going to see, unless there's some catalyst to shift the market in the other direction. You can see from yesterday's move that immediate sell-offs get sold into. You know, yesterday's highs, certainly not safe. And the reason why this didn't break down straight down to zero, like if you were watching or listening yesterday, I said, as soon as it starts to fall down, people expect it to go all the way down and break down to new lows. There's no reason for it to do that. We had a flush out that was an overextended sell-off, and so price needs time to consolidate within that. Some of these moving averages need to catch up, namely like the daily bands is your first example, right? We get significantly below it like we did over here, bands catch up like we did over here, bands catch up, and then when it catches up to the bands, it could be bearish or it could be bullish. So we're still just in that period where the market's finding its feet. Nothing that's worth over-analyzing or reading too much into. Don't allow each day's price action to change your higher time frame view. It's just consolidation. ETH, much weaker than BTC, and it seems like there's still a lot of selling going on with ETH. There's people who are exiting, and ETH BTC shows this as well. ETH BTC ratio that everyone, well not everyone, but ETH maxis were just telling you so much how this was reversing, has done nothing but bearish retests, you know, all the way along. So obviously tried to take the lows in reverse, failed, tried to sweep again, failed, down again, failed, lower high, lower high, lower high, bands red, bands red, bands red. And at this point, there's nothing that you want to be looking at with ETH versus Bitcoin until it significantly shifts the market structure, which looks like that. Moving up, holding, and then starting to actually move into an uptrend. I think though, whether ETH US dollar price goes up or not, I think it's going to be difficult for ETH to outperform BTC because Bitcoin just has so much more going for it. It's more attractive to Wall Street investors, as you can see by the ETFs. Obviously, ETH ETF is more new, but Bitcoin has been sold to the boomers and they understand it. Bitcoin is more of a, more history, more proof, and it's obviously stronger. Right? This chart shows you the last time ETH outperformed Bitcoin to an all-time high perspective was 2017. So that's also why Solana is kind of having this outperformance over ETH. First of all, massive outperformance over ETH. And I said this a couple of weeks ago. In order, Bitcoin, then Sol, then ETH is the preferred ranking of them. Even though ETH is obviously number 2 in market cap, clearly the charts show that Sol is stronger than ETH. And Sol is not stronger than Bitcoin. Sol is consolidating against Bitcoin rather than breaking down. So Sol BTC is not at new highs yet, but it's holding up well. ETH BTC is at new lows, and Sol ETH is at new all-time highs. So Sol stronger than ETH, Bitcoin still better than both of them. But Sol, if anything's catching Bitcoin, in terms of the short-term relative strength, it would be Sol. And that's been the theme of this bull market so far. And, it's like, I feel like a lot of this, let's talk about ETH a little bit, because a lot of the ETH maxis and ETH holders have had many different reasons why ETH would outperform, right? And we'll go to an ETH BTC chart, and we'll just look at it here, just objectively. So in the past few years, since the last bull run, you had the ETH merge. That was this rally, when ETH went from proof of work to proof of stake. It formed a lower high, bearish retest, and led to this is the ETH, like that's when ETH had its biggest upgrade ever. The thing that ETH maxis told you meant that ETH was better than Bitcoin. This is when the ETH maxis write their articles and say proof of stake is a superior security model to proof of work. It's not. And there are benefits of proof of stake, but there's massive trade-offs too. And the number one thing being the Ethereum keeps changing their monetary policy. Crypto exists because central banks constantly change their monetary policy. That's literally why Bitcoin exists. It exists because in 2008, they just printed shitloads of money and said, yeah, we don't care. As soon as the bankers get in trouble, we're going to bail them out. And at the expense of all of you, middle class and people who don't have hard assets, you're all getting fucked because they're going to print more money. What Ethereum does is the same thing. They don't print more Ethereum, but they change the security model, they change the monetary policy, moving it away from a mining proof of work to a validator proof of stake, and making upgrades and changes and deflationary and EIP 1559, all these things. ETH is more of a tech platform than a hard money. And you don't have to be a genius to realize that that was the absolute top of that bounce, right? And it's been down only ever since. So if ETH going proof of stake is so good, why has it had nothing but downside since then, to the tune of 53% against Bitcoin and currently 50%? Chart would tell you that wasn't a very bullish thing for ETH holders, right? Then all the way along there's been ETH, upgrades. I think this was the Chapella upgrade, I believe. You had EIP 1559, which was, I think that was actually before. Oh no, the implementation of it was in 2023 maybe. Can't remember exactly. And you had, what else? You had obviously ETH ETF. That was the next big one, right? Here's the ETH ETF. So every time that ETH has something that is supposed to be good, it goes lower against Bitcoin. Now, there used to be arguments by the ETH community that were based on fundamental factors. These three red arrows are that. These are all periods and points at which ETH had some kind of change or development that the ETH maxi said meant, oh, now ETH is going to be better. This is the moment. This is the moment. That's where they get their arrows. This is the moment. This is the moment. It's coming. Don't worry, it's coming. And it never comes. Now, it has devolved into, at least what I can see, it has devolved into ETH maxi saying, don't write ETH off. Right? ETH's going to have its time. Just wait. And so instead of being anything based on objective reality, it's going to happen at some point. And it's essentially, I think, the narrative now is essentially moved to, it can't go down forever, therefore it must go up at some point. And that is not a good approach. Right? If all the changes they make, and the ETF getting launched, and all these things that are supposed to be great, if they're all so great, why does it keep going down? Does anybody have an answer? The answer is obviously quite clear. Investors prefer Bitcoin over ETH. That could change. I'm not here saying ETH is going to zero against Bitcoin, but I've been very consistent with this all the way along. It's like, whenever it actually shows that it can go up against Bitcoin, which for me, as I've said for months, weekly bans, at least go green, please, right? And it just doesn't. So that's all I really, I get questions about ETH quite a lot, but that's all I care. I don't hate ETH. I think Bitcoin's better. And obviously it's fun to clown on ETH. It's funny to meme about ETH and all that kind of stuff, sure. But it's not a philosophical decision. It's not an emotional decision. It's very much just, when it actually shows signs of outperformance, then it becomes attractive, right? Whereas I see the ETH, the ETH maxis on Twitter have just devolved now completely into hoping and more of a, bury your head in the sand and just say, oh, well, and it's the most typical bag holder thing ever. It's down so much, now I can't sell it. I just have to, I'm in for the ride and I just wait. And to be honest, that probably ends up okay. Maybe it goes down more first, right? And then eventually it bottoms out and it starts to move up. And great. But at that point, if you turned ETH bull because of the merge in 2022, it could literally be 3 years before it even gets back to break even. And that is what a lot of ETH maxis are doing. They just have a stack of ETH that's just sitting in their wallet and they don't want to sell it. They can't sell it. And it's a very typical, the worst thing you do as a trader, which is ignore the chart, ignore price, and just say, well, I guess it'll come back. And it does usually come back, but opportunity cost is massive. When's it going to get back to merge levels? Just to be break even, not to be outperforming, just to be break even. Because this is when most people abandoned Bitcoin and flipped to ETH and said, oh, Bitcoin's old boomer rock, it's the pet rock, it's no good, blah, blah, blah. Well, it seems to be doing pretty well so far. And all of this now is if ETH goes up to there, you're going to have ETH maxis euphoric all over the place. At what? Getting back to break even? So, the chart's clear. The chart's clear. Remove emotions, remove opinions, and just say, the chart's telling you. It's not good. It's not a better trade than Bitcoin. It's not a better store of value than Bitcoin, quite clearly. Store of value losing 50% against BTC is not a store of value. It's not good money. And that's it, right? I mean, what do you do? So, and then obviously, of course, ETH, now the revisionists want to tell you why ETH's underperforming, sorry. And it usually centers around something like, oh, well, because there's so many layer 2s, right? People have to choose between ETH or Arbitrum or Optimism or ZK Sync or... Cool. But why do you say that? People say it as if that's a valid reason. You guys created it. The ETH community created it by diluting their product so much. People laugh at Bitcoin maxis because Bitcoin maxis think every single thing other than Bitcoin is a shitcoin, but that is absolutely to their benefit. They are absolutely anti-altcoins. and Bitcoin has benefited from it. ETH embraced shitcoinery, and it's to the detriment of ETH. This is just simple logic. Go and look at the Bitcoin ecosystem. There are no alternatives, right? Name another coin in the Bitcoin ecosystem that is worth holding. Doesn't exist. But in ETH, because it's so much about building, and it's different, right? It's totally different to Bitcoin. It's about building new things and expanding it and developing the platform and layer 2s and layer 3s and all this kind of stuff. Cool. But that's holding ETH back. So from a high time frame view, they've made their own bed. Now they have to lie in it. And part of it, like part of this whole Solana, I'm not really like a believer that Solana is going to long term outperform BTC. It can outperform ETH, sure. But Solana will probably run into the same problems if it gets bigger. Right? People will make their money on Solana and then they'll go, okay, let's do Solana layer 2s. We need to scale it, all this kind of stuff, or Solana, whatever. And they will do the same thing and they'll dilute and dilute and dilute. Because fundamentally at the core, everything else is flawed except Bitcoin. If your argument is we want one store value, we want one base money, we want one, pristine asset. Nothing else has that. They can't, because they can't survive alone. Solana can't just be a store of value. It has to be a tech platform where people build stuff. ETH, same thing. So if you're looking at it from a trade perspective, ETH will offer a really good trade if and when it flips the bands to green, right? And then ETH's better than Bitcoin in that period, and it probably has a few weeks or months of outperformance, and holding ETH over Bitcoin there is a good idea. Like it was in the merge pump for a short time, like it was in most of the bull run in 2020 and 2021. Great, absolutely. Periods of outperformance, 100%. But it's quite clear that it's not a long-term play over BTC. Because for that, you just zoom out one more time frame and you look at the long term. And since, and there are people, by the way, there are people who went ETH in 2018 that are, if you think it's bad about 2021 being 50% down off your all-time high, there's people who are still down off their all-time high against Bitcoin over here, and they're 70% lower. Now, in dollar terms, they're up, because ETH over here was a couple $100, at least after the bull run, right? In dollar terms, you're still fine, but you would have been more fine holding Bitcoin, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters. And let's take it just one step further. If you want to know when to buy ETH for a long-term play, it's not when the bands are red. On a monthly, no. But at least, if you want a faster signal, at least wait for the weekly. Yeah? And when it goes, it'll probably go fast, right? When something gets so beaten down and crushed and crushed and crushed and crushed, and eventually, whenever that turns around, it probably goes pretty much one direction. You're not going to get it to reclaim the bands and then consolidate and let everyone fill their bags for 6 months. It's probably just going to rip. Because the pendulum swings both ways. When it gets so beaten down, it just flies. And, it probably won't give any... I think a lot of people probably expect ETH BTC to do this next, where, it kind of bottoms out. It's a bit of recency bias as well, as you see. Bottoms out, consolidates, boom, away it goes. I would say probably it's actually going to look more like this, where it's absolutely shit until it's not shit, and then it rips. And then it probably tops out. And you have a really fast move, right? Really fast. However far it goes, I don't know. But that would be my assumption and expectation. So an ETH trade will make sense at some point in the future. It always will. Never write anything off. But never writing it off is not the same as, should I hold this for 10 years? My opinion, no. Should I hold it for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whenever the chart looks good? Sure. And stocks. Let's go and look at stocks. So stocks are weaker at the moment than crypto, and the S&P is. So when you're looking at the S&P, you want to look at times. It's not just about this. It's not just this pullback, because you look at this and think, oh well, maybe it's just pulling back, it's just consolidating, hasn't made new lows, it's going to hold and it's going to consolidate and go higher. It's when the selling happens. The New York session is what matters. The start and the end of the session are what matters. So if you put on the indicator to show the New York opens, this is what you can see quite clearly. And we'll look at just Tuesday and Wednesday. So Tuesday, selling off the open. Directional moves come in at the start and at the end of a session, typically, right? So on Tuesday, there was selling initially. And at the end of the session, there was selling. That's when the flows are highest. If you look at volume, you'll see this. The volume is highest at the beginning of the session, right? Or sorry, that's the end of the session. Hold on. This indicator's wrong. In terms of, give me one sec. All right, so that's not showing the New York Open correctly for some reason. Let me just mark it out manually, and we'll look at what yesterday's session was doing. So here was Tuesday's. There we go. Tuesday's open, and here is Wednesday's open, which is over here. I thought that was wrong because remember Tuesday we had a nice green day. All right, here we go. So Tuesday started off with a rally, all good. Wednesday started off with selling, and then sold down into the close. So we're looking at what happens next in New York. If they're selling early, when the volume's highest, and they're selling late towards the end of the session, it's a bad sign. The same goes in reverse. If there's buying early and there's buying late, good, right? You're seeing the green pushes towards at the beginning and at the end of the session, price goes higher. Indications of the end of the session yesterday, going into this 8 p.m. UTC, were heavy selling down on stocks. We'll see if that continues. It would indicate that it probably does. That would be the assumption, that we probably see continued selling into today's session. And whether we do or not, it's kind of immaterial, right? For a crypto, it's not like it's going to be a one-to-one comparison. It is whenever you've crashes, right? When the market crashes like we did on Monday, Bitcoin goes to pretty much a one-to-one correlation with stocks because just everything that's risk gets sold off. But you can see here that Bitcoin is significantly stronger than the S&P right now. And so what matters is, if stocks make new lows, what does it do to crypto? That'll tell you about the relative strength. Crypto doesn't need to go to new lows if stocks do, because crypto is a lot more volatile and went down a lot more, a lot further, a lot faster, and had a bigger liquidation. Stocks did not take out significant lows over here, right? The stock sell-off just took us down into a previous support, whereas the Bitcoin sell-off took us below support. The massive liquidation, and that can easily be enough to bottom the market for a while, which is why I'm saying, like, wait a week or two. You have to let price develop, consolidation happen, see where it moves from here. And across the rest of the market, it's similar. I won't dig into altcoins here because we'll do altcoin request stream today, 4 p.m. UTC. Be there for that. And we'll see how some of these alts are, many of them have obviously put in capitulation bottoms for now. And so the only thing matters is, are they going to go lower, or are they going to form bottoms and form some kind of base here? That's what matters. That's what we're looking at. And we'll see that today. There's no economic data of note this week. So this is this is the week that is usually pretty quiet. Next week we've got inflation, CPI. But today we have unemployment claims. That's probably going to be more impactful than normal. This comes out every week, so normally it's not a big thing. But it will probably have a bit more eyeballs on it because people are slightly worried about, recession and stuff. You might see that. Otherwise, not much. The real economic data picks up again next week. So we'll see. FOMC members speaking later. That's probably worth looking at. Might be giving you a little bit of a talking the markets up about, are we going to cut rates? Are we going to support the markets? Whatever we're going to do. That could be slightly impactful, but overall, don't expect too much. See you later. Altcoin requests. GM.